despite the fact that I underrated Shane Beamer and that he has made me eat my words, I think the longer that Shane Beamer is in the SEC East, whether it's South Carolina or Tennessee or whoever, I think that's good news. South Carolina or Florida or whoever, I think that's good news for Tennessee, Caleb.
Yeah, there's a sugar high with Shane Beamer right now because
A sugar high. I love that.
he does have a really, really, really good quarterback. And like I just said, a quarterback can be the great equalizer in things. And I guess they finally decided to let Spencer Rattler play his game towards the end of the year. You could tell they switched up their game plan, which will probably help them this year. I don't know how much that helps them long term, though. Because again, when Spencer Rattler's gone, what are you going to do? And you're right. Within 2 years, we're going to see a lot of these players that committed to Tennessee and then committed to South Carolina, who would have committed to Tennessee, maybe hit the transfer portal. So we'll see how it goes. Shane Beamer, is Spencer Rattler Shane Beamer's Josh Dobbs? Is that a good analogy?
Well, only if.
Like,
Yeah,
is he to Beamer what Dobbs was to Jones?
Yeah, probably. That's a pretty good comparison because I think he wins a couple of more games for Shane Beamer than Shane Beamer would have won without. And I thought Josh Dobbs kept Tennessee respectable when, in all honesty, their program from top to bottom was not respectable. Some other guys that have gone from school to school within the SEC, of course, Houston Nutt, Ole Miss, and Arkansas, and then Doug Dickey was another one. So could Shane Beamer make that sort of jump from South Carolina? Yeah, if Florida wants it. From South Carolina to Florida, if Florida wants him, that's the big question. I know Shane Beamer is going to look at it from a recruiting perspective, and he would make that move in a heartbeat. I don't even care if the money's the same, but certainly he would be willing to make that move if it were offered to him.
I think so too. I mean, would you not leave South Carolina for Florida? Like, who wouldn't leave South Carolina for Florida? That's a better job. It's not the best job in the world, but it's a better job in South Carolina. So I agree. I think Shane Beamer would take that move. The thing that might work in Shane Beamer's favor, and I've been saying this for a while, Clemson is on the decline. We saw that last year. Now, Dabo, to his credit, made the right staff hire again, bringing in Garrett Riley to run the offense. So maybe they're going to have another surge this year. But Dave, with conference realignment and the way things are shaking out and the awful deals in the SEC, I thought about this recently. You know, we talked about last week how Florida State can't exist in the same sphere as Florida unless they get out of the deal. Do you think Clemson can exist in the same sphere as South Carolina at this point either? I mean, this is South Carolina's advantage. They're bringing in way more money than Clemson is. And if they don't get this conference realignment thing figured out, South Carolina could really end up overtaking Clemson as the premier state school in the state, as the state school. Not two state schools, but it's just South Carolina.
Right. And to get to your answer, South Carolina is a talent upper middle class state. It's not a talent rich state. It's not LSU. It's not Louisiana. It's not Texas. It's not California. It's not Florida. But those states I just mentioned can support multiple teams. Can the state of South Carolina support two teams at the same time? I will tell you no, which leads us to, was the end of last year a fluke for South Carolina, or do they have a program on the rise? Let me begin with you, Caleb Calhoun. Which is it?
So I don't think the Spencer Rattler turnaround was a total fluke. I think those 2 wins were flukes, though. I do. I think those 2 wins were flukes. I think South Carolina benefited from Clemson not having a quarterback situation figured out, and they benefited from the whole Jeremy Banks saga with Tennessee. If Jeremy Banks doesn't decide to throw a right hook at Hendon Hooker, and if Cade Klubnik is starting at Clemson, then South Carolina finishes the year 6-6, and we're having a totally different conversation about the Gamecocks right now than we're having. And so it had a lot more to do with what was with the inner workings of what was going on with Tennessee and Clemson at the time than it had anything to do with what was going on at South Carolina. Even though Spencer Rattler did turn a corner and play much better in those games, and there's no denying that, they still don't win those games if those incidents don't happen.
Yes, but they did happen. So they're on the rise. mean, I can't debate that. And I was a South Carolina hater, and I know we've got a lot of South Carolina fans that are on our channel. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't at this point. I was a South Carolina hater, man, before the Tennessee game. I thought that they'd come back to earth before the Clemson game. I thought they might even play flat in the bowl game. They beat Clemson, did not play flat in the bowl game, and they're recruiting really well. I can't say they're not on the rise. I mean, they're on the rise, at least in my mind, and I would argue, Caleb, they should be in anybody's mind, because this is a football team that I thought was going to stumble along and just be an absolute disaster. And Shane Beamer might even have gotten, based off what I was told, might even have gotten fired at the end of last year before the Tennessee game, but definitely was going to be on the hot seat headed into this year. He's not. So by definition of both recruiting and his job security, they're on the rise. I don't see how we could argue that.
You're right. So could two things be true? And I'm trying to think of another program that's like this. Has there ever been a fluke game put a program on the rise? And I mean, actually, yes, there has. What am I saying? 2001 Tennessee LSU put LSU on the rise because of Nick Saban. That's the flukest game of all time. And it made Nick Saban. I'm not saying Shane Beamer is going to be Nick Saban. I'm not saying that. I am saying, though, that there are instances where fluke games can change the trajectory of a program. And it looks like Tennessee and Clemson might have done that for South Carolina in back-to-back weeks. There's no way they get this recruiting class that they're getting right now if those two games don't happen.
SC Scout guy said there was absolutely zero chance he was fired last year. I agree with that. What I was told before the Tennessee South Carolina game, SC Scout guys, to kind of clarify a little bit, I was told that he was going to have to make pretty significant changes on his staff, which to me is a step away from getting fired. So I didn't think he was going to get fired at the end of last year. The question I have for South Carolina is, when I talk to people in coaching circles, they don't think a lot of that coaching staff. So Shane Beamer might end up being the next best thing since his dad, Frank Beamer, who was a legendary coach, and I got great, mad respect for him. But if he doesn't have a great staff around him, that's going to be a problem. So defining a successful season for South Carolina, I don't think is the college football playoff. That is going to be, by the way, anybody that wins 9 or 10 games the year before, barring something insane happening, you should absolutely expect your team to be in the college football playoff once it's 12. And when it's 12 teams, don't give me that, oh, well, we got another rebuilding year. I don't care. It doesn't matter. You should expect your team to be in the 12. So if there were 12, it's easy to define for me. South Carolina has a successful season if they make the college football playoff. If they don't, then they didn't have a step in the right direction type of season. However, we're not there yet. This is 4 teams, so you've got to be one of the best 4 teams in the country. I don't think South Carolina's ready for that. I think a successful season and continuing to go in the right direction is a little bit tough to define. I think it is showing that you have Spencer Rattler on the correct path now, because you didn't for a good bit of the year last year. But if you're able to do that now, Caleb, then if that offense is anywhere close to the top of offenses we're seeing at Tennessee, Southern California, TCU, I mean, if they're anywhere in that ballpark, that to me defines success. Now, as far as the schedule, what would wins define? How many wins would define a successful season? Because I think we can both agree they're not ready for the playoff jump unless they surprise us like Tennessee did last year.
Well, I was just going through their schedule. In the same way I talked about Tennessee, I got to talk about South Carolina in terms of the schedule. Look, Dave, this is crazy. 11-1 is on the table. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's on the table because, okay, let's go through their schedule. Neutral site game versus North Carolina to start the year. North Carolina was really underwhelming last year. They could win that game. I think that might be a toss-up because Drake May's so good. And I don't know how you feel. I think Drake May's a better NFL prospect than Caleb Williams in 2 years. But
I think Drake May's a John Elway type of prospect, and you won't hear me throw that around.
There you go. So, yeah, I mean, I think so. North Carolina could win that game, but okay, South Carolina could win that game too. So if South Carolina pulls it out, then they get Furman. Okay, they get at Georgia. We assume loss, but then they play Mississippi State at home. They visit Tennessee. I mean, they did beat Tennessee last year. We both think Tennessee is going to win this year, but they did beat them last year. So you can't just write off South Carolina if you're coming from South Carolina's perspective. Then you got Florida at home. I think South Carolina beats Florida at home, don't you?
Yes, I do. So, for instance, we know SC Scout Guy is a South Carolina fan, so he says winning 8 games with a chance to win 9, they're still building. I think nowadays with the transfer, SC Scout Guy, I think you're setting your bar a little bit low. I think 9 defines whether or not this season is a success for South Carolina. Hoghead says 9-3 or better would be a good step for SC.
Who do they lose to outside of Georgia, Tennessee, and Clemson?
No, I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out. SC Scout Guy, I think you got your bar a little bit low. I mean,
Clemson at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think that 9 wins. If they just win 8, I think that would be a disappointment in the wrong direction, and in a lot of ways, it would set South Carolina back for perhaps years because they just re-upped that contract with Shane Beamer. Don't forget some of those dreaded contracts. I mean, Jerry Green had one season when they got bounced by North Carolina at Tennessee where he got a new contract after, and it was like, oh, darn it. We didn't really want to give this to him, but now we're kind of stuck because he won. We've seen that happen before. No offense, SC Scout Guy, but I think that's where South Carolina is going to be in a couple of years. But I got nothing.
First of a successful season.
Yeah, I mean, you have one successful season and then oopsie.